What's going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Neighborhood Podcast. I'm one of the hosts of the podcast. My name's Kevin Valentin.
And I'm the other host of the podcast. My name is Kyle Dabro. Kev, we had quite the weekend, dude. I don't know about you, but we got a lot of things to talk about today.
Dude, the NBA playoffs never disappoint, to be honest. There's always those few games where it's like, oh, that was expected. But then you had games like that happened over the weekend where it was upset central. The away team won a lot of games, big performances from some key players. And the unfortunate side, there were some injuries to discuss as well. So, like Kyle said, whole lot to talk about.
Oh yeah, for sure. Guys, we had a little bit of everything. We had some huge road win. Uh, we had some huge road wins by some teams that, frankly, we didn't expect going into this weekend. Like Kev said, the only damper that would put on the weekend within the first games of the first round of the NBA playoffs was the amount of injuries that we saw. We saw Giannis go down with a lower back injury. We saw Tyler Hero break his hand at the end of the first half for the Heat. We also had Anthony Davis have a little shoulder stinger that looked like his whole shoulder went out. I believe that was in the first half of that game. And
Yeah.
then John Morant injured his hand late in the fourth quarter for Memphis. It's just there's been a boatload of injuries. Obviously, that's something that we'll talk about later in the episode. But Kev, I'm gonna pass the agenda to this one, or I'm gonna pass the agenda to you on this one, bud.
Yeah,
Floor's
no,
yours.
all I appreciate it. So, like Kyle said, we got a lot to talk about, but we're not going to go over every single game. We all know and all see or have seen that, like I had stated at the beginning, there were some, as Kyle stated today earlier, business games. Obviously Philadelphia takes care of business against the Nets. Obviously, the Celtics blow out the Hawks, and so on and so forth. So, the games that we are going to discuss today are going to be games that were the most intriguing, but also have the biggest narratives behind them. First and foremost, my matchup of the weekend, the 4 and 5 seed. The Knicks come out with the upset against the Cavaliers in Cleveland. Then we're going to go into the Warriors Kings game that went all the way down to the wire. And Sacramento holds on for their first playoff win in damn near 20 years. But that doesn't mean that the Warriors weren't close. It was a great game going back and forth. Steph goes for 30, but it just wasn't enough between Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox. Then we are going to slide into the 2-7 matchup where the Los Angeles Lakers come out with a victory due to some key contributions from Rui Hachimura, from LeBron James, Anthony Davis, from Austin Reeves. I mean, you name it, every single Laker, I feel like, contributed to this game. It was incredible. But like Kyle said, unfortunately, John Morant ends up exiting this game late in the fourth quarter with what seemed to be a wrist or hand injury. So we'll keep you guys posted on what we hear from that. Moving on to today's slate, again, it's going to be the Heat and the Bucks. Giannis Antetokounmpo gets hurt in the first quarter, landing really awkwardly and aggressive on his lower back. He ends up leaving the game before halftime, and he does not return. So that is something to monitor. But on top of that, Tyler Hero also exits the game and looks to be out for the remainder of the playoffs with a broken hand. There's no official diagnosis or report how long he will be out, but I mean, again, we're no doctor, but I'm pretty sure you need your hand to play basketball. And if it's broken, you're not going to be able to play much. So Miami, despite that, comes out with a victory. Jimmy Butler goes for 35 and 11. Playoff Jimmy is back, and Miami takes a surprising 1-0 lead. And then currently, as we are talking, the Clippers and the Suns are going at it right now. The Clippers are up 106 to 101 with a minute and 51. Kyle and I will talk about that at the end, again, just to kind of wrap it all up since we've been watching that on and off while prepping for the episode as well as watching it beforehand. So we'll give a full diagnosis there. And then to close the episode out as a whole, to wrap that on up like a little Christmas present, a little bow, we're going to just kind of recap the remaining games. Obviously, the Minnesota-Denver game is starting in the next few minutes, so we're not going to get to that. We'll talk a little bit about Philly. We'll talk a little bit about the Hawks game and some of the other matchups that kind of took place during the weekend. But again, a little bit more of a simpler motion of talking about it in passing as opposed to divulging an entire segment. So, Kyle, let's just dive right into it. The NBA playoffs are here. They never cease to disappoint. What do we have first?
Well, the first game that we're going to go over is going to be the New York Knicks and the Cleveland Cavaliers. This was a very good game to start off the weekend, as far as I see it. It was a competitive game, came down to the wire. But the Knicks, in surprising fashion, depending on how you look at it, come away with a road win in game one. And honestly, this was somewhat of a trend that we saw from this past weekend. And you could even say that the Knicks, frankly, got this whole road winning thing started for the rest of the teams that ended up winning on the road this past weekend. They won by the score of 101-97. It was a gritty game. Ended up being a defensive game for the Knicks because they held the Cavs to under 97 points. When you really look at the Knicks just from the whole roster perspective, their leading scorer, Jalen Brunson, put up 27 points. Behind him, you had Julius Randle with 19 and 10. This was Julius Randle's first game back in about a week and a half. He had missed a couple games before the end of the regular season, and it seemed like he was getting back into a groove. Then when you kick it over to the Cavs, obviously the leading scorer was definitely Donovan Mitchell. He had 38 points, had 5 rebounds, had 8 assists, and then their second leading scorer was Darius Garland with 17. But just overall, it was a very competitive game. Came down to the end, and surprisingly, the Knicks are off to a 1-0 series lead over the Cavs. So, Kev, to kick this one to you, what are your takeaways from the Knicks getting a huge road win against the Cavs in game 1 of their series?
I mean, it just goes to show you the grit, the toughness of this team going into a hostile environment and essentially coming out with probably one of the toughest wins of the weekend just because you're going up against Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, one of the best backcourts in the NBA. Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle. As Kyle said, Julius Randle's been out for a couple of games, couple of weeks, and he had himself a rough game from an efficiency standpoint. He was 7 of 20. We all know the looming narrative that comes around with Julius Randle, and he's just one of those players that historically just does not perform in the playoffs. We remember the round, or should I say, we remember the series he had against Atlanta a few years ago where he just could not hit the front side of a barn, was a consistent turnover machine, and was just taking ill-advised shots. And to an extent, you can say that he did a lot of that in this game as well because he had 5 turnovers. He was 7 of 20 from the field. He was also 3 of 10 from 3. It's like, yes, he did end with 19 points and 10 boards, but that was a very tough fought game for him. They were very physical with him. He was trying to get back into a rhythm. You can tell he was forcing up some shots to try to get into some form of consistency, but I expect him to find a way to turn it around. But also, like Kyle stated, when you talk about Jalen Brunson, the season that he's had, the organic makeup of this team where everybody has consistently contributed. Josh Hart played well. Obi Toppin had 9 points. I mean, Emmanuel quickly had an off night. He only had 3 points, but it goes to show this young group of guys is not going to shy away from adversity. A tough matchup like this. This also gives me hope that the Knicks can continue to play competitive because some of the guys that have helped them throughout the season had rough games. Like I said, Quickly had 3 points. We've seen Quickly go off for 25, 30 points a game off the bench on a frequent basis when it comes to the Knicks play as of late before as the All-Star game came to a close. RJ Barrett, he was 2 of 12. I don't believe that that's going to happen again. He only had 7 points. So if the Knicks were able to capitalize on this inefficient night from their supporting cast, especially when you go 27% from the three-point line, I think that this leads me to believe that the Knicks are going to continue to improve as the playoffs continue. When you flip it over to Cleveland, Kyle and I were talking about this just a few minutes ago. Donovan Mitchell lights up a stat sheet, right? Absolutely incredible. 38 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds, and he only had 2 turnovers. But the number that is just astounding, he took 16 threes. He made 6, but there were just a lot of instances where he forced up shots that weren't necessarily needed. And at the same time, he put Cleveland in a lot of tight positions on some possessions. But at the end of the day, when you are carrying an offense like he did for this game, because there were players that did not contribute. I mean, LeVert had 3 points. Garland had 17, but he had a somewhat okay night from the field. Then you talk about Mobley only having 8 points. He was 4 of 13. So when everybody else is struggling, you need somebody to step up and keep you competitive, especially when it comes to the postseason. So Mitchell did what he needed to do, but similar to what I said with the Knicks, I don't believe that LeVert's going to have another bad game. I expect Darius Garland to find a way to turn it around, and at the same time, the supporting cast of the Cavaliers are going to have to ship it up because you cannot have Donovan Mitchell jacking up 30 shots a game. You cannot have him playing 44 minutes and just continuously carrying the weight of an organization like he did in Utah, or else it's going to be similar results. He's going to go for 30, 35 plus a game, but the team is not going to be successful. So overall, like I predicted, this game went back and forth all the way down to the wire. A 4-point game. I think that this is going to continue to be one of the best series of the entire postseason. Hopefully this continues to be consistent. I would love for it to go back and forth. The Knicks may get this one, but maybe Cleveland gets the next one and continue that into 7 games. But I will stay with my pick. I think Cleveland finds a way to bounce back in game 2.
For me, this was just the first game of the series, and both teams had to be able to kind of establish their footing. And I will say, I think that the Knicks got off to a relatively good start in this game. They just seemed to exit out of the gate a lot more smoothly than the Cavs did. And it seemed like pretty much throughout the entire course of the game, the Cavs were always in this catch up mode where the Knicks would be up 5, 6, sometimes even as high as 8 to 10 points. And then the Cavs would go on a small 5 to 6-0 run to close the gap. And then the Knicks would respond. And I gotta give a lot of credit to the Knicks for being able to weather the storm going into a hostile environment, like you said, Kev, in Cleveland, and coming out with a huge road win. When, to be quite honest with you, even though that we think that this is going to be one of the more competitive series in the first round of the playoffs, we seemed pretty sure that more than likely the Cavs are going to walk away with this series when it's all said and done. But the Knicks got off to a great start, and I got to give them a lot of credit for that. And the way that I look at this game overall, I can't pretty much hit all of the individual stats that you could throw out with this game. It just seemed like the Knicks were more patient in this game. And when they were able to get second chance opportunities, especially on the offensive glass, they took advantage of it. Because when you look from the offensive rebounding perspective, that's where I think the Knicks actually got a lot of damage. And when you look at the rebounding category as a whole, the Knicks definitely won that battle. And it just seemed as if whenever Mitchell Robinson was out there on the court, just that one-on-one matchup between Robinson and Jarrett Allen, it seemed like Robinson got the best of Jarrett in that one-on-one matchup just because just the intensity that Robinson was able to bring, the scrappiness that he brought to the floor. Granted, it's not as if Mitchell Robinson lit up the scoreboard putting up 25 points, but this is where sometimes I think the numbers can lie. I think the main thing that you could look at someone like Mitchell Robinson was the fact that he was out there for 25, 26 minutes, but they got good minutes out of him. And not only that, when you go towards the latter part of the game, I thought Jalen Brunson was able to knock down some big shots for them, especially from the mid-range. I thought Josh Hart was huge for knocking down some key three-pointers as well, especially when the Cavs were making a run late in the fourth quarter. It just seemed as if the Knicks were just one step ahead of the Cavs in this game from beginning to end. And when it comes to the Cavs, they just seemed rushed the entire game. Like Kev said, Donovan Mitchell, even though that he almost scored 40 points, there were some three-point opportunities where, to be quite honest, just to be honest with you guys, he rushed the shots. He was trying to get into rhythm, was feeling himself a little bit too much, and jacked up some threes where some of them barely hit the rim, and some of them were even air balls. So I think going into game two, my main thing I would look with the Cavs is be a little bit more patient, let the game come to you instead of forcing it. And I think with the Knicks, they have to keep up the intensity that they brought in game one. If they're able to do that, I think they can win pretty solidly in game two. But if they slack off a little bit, if the Cavs take advantage, if they let the game flow a little bit more, not casually, but if they just let the game flow in their favor more in game two, then I think the Cavs will be able to even up the series 1-1 going back to New York for game three. But overall, good road win for the Knicks, and the Cavs definitely left some plays out there in game one. And I think that's something that they'll try to improve upon going into game two.
Something to monitor, we have to talk about. I saw some highlights where Julius Randle was getting really physical. Obviously, he is a very dominant and physical player as a whole, very passionate player. Sometimes can be a little bit of a loose cannon. That mental state has to be monitored for the New York Knicks, because if that puts him into specific trouble with technical fouls or personal fouls, him being aggressive in the post, we've seen him, like I said, lose control with those emotions quite a bit of times throughout his tenure in New York. We all know that some players play well when they get upset. Julius Randle seems to be one of those players that, unfortunately, when he gets in that mind space, it's all about him. He starts to force shots. He tries to assert that dominance at a higher level. That may put the Knicks in trouble, whether it be at the bonus, turning the ball over, and of course, just like I said before, just putting up some bad shots. So again, Julius Randle is working his way back from being out for a few weeks, but that narrative still is looming. He does not historically play well in the playoffs. And if he continues to act like this, and maybe even have an episode on the sideline with his teammates, with an official, that may not bode well for the chemistry of the New York Knicks. So again, not to be negative, but something I'm paying attention to.
And one more thing, I'm going to hit the Cavs with one more point here. I think one thing that we have to look from Cleveland going into game two is that just Evan Mobley needs to just get into rhythm.
Yeah.
In game one, he definitely struggled. There's no other way to put it. Just couldn't get into a rhythm. Looked a little bit sloppy out there. It just seemed like the pace of the game got to him a little bit. Could never get any solid footing in that game. And we'll see what happens going into game two with him. But hopefully he has a better performance than what he had in game one. Kev, I know we're watching this Clippers and Suns game. I don't know what you have on your screen. How much time?
17.7. They just called a timeout because they couldn't inbound the ball. Monty just had to waste a second.
Yeah. So just to kind of get you guys up to speed here, the Clippers are up 111 to 108, and pretty much this is big possession here for the Suns. They could potentially tie the game. Kev, how do you think that they should approach this? You got 17.
I'd probably say go for the quick two.
And then just hope that one of the Clippers
and
misses
just
their free
foul.
throws.
I mean, to me now without a timeout, you have to go for the two. If you go for the three, you miss. You have some of the most dynamic scorers. You have KD who can pull up over anybody. Obviously, you have Devin Booker, who's probably one of the most efficient mid-range shooters in the league as well. Obviously, Chris Paul and so on and so forth. For the sake of how much time is left, we all know how quickly people can foul, and it also seems like the Clippers don't have any timeouts either, so you have to hopefully deny the ball and maybe even try to force somebody to delay on that 5-second or that 8-second inbound rule. We'll see what happens from there, but overall, I think that I think the Suns should go for the quick two and take what they can.
Yeah, honestly, we'll just kind of commentate as we see the play out. So they're just showing a replay right now of the.
I got to make a comment. We were talking about this personally. Yeah, we got to stop making picks for these games, man. Kyle and I suck at this. We were talking about it before the playoffs started after the play-in. We got both picks wrong. The Bulls and the Thunder lost.
Yeah, the Thunder got smoked. Our Bulls pick actually wasn't too bad until like the last minute and a half of the game. The Bulls were up.
Those last 3 minutes, the shot selection was horrible.
Last 3 minutes.
Last 3 minutes. Oh, Russell Westbrook blocks Devin and then hits it out. Wow.
What a play.
And, dude, Russell Westbrook is 3 of 19 from the field, so he made it up on defense today. Good shit, Russ.
That's a bad field goal percentage, though.
Wow. Did they foul Batum? Was that Batum?
They either fouled him or
was that Gordon? That's Gordon. What a block. I don't know. Oh, I don't know how to cheer for either team here because I hate Devin Booker, and I just have a thing with the Clippers since obviously they played the Mavs a couple times. But
that's a good play by Russ. That was a very good play.
Yeah.
Shooting wise, just wasn't off. But what's interesting when you were going over your analysis with the Cavs and Knicks game, I was watching some of the second chance opportunities that the Clippers were having with about a minute left. Bro, just Russell's effort, just trying to get the offensive rebound, not even getting it, but just forcing the ball off of a Suns player, whether it be like DeAndre Ayton or Torrey Craig. His impact was definitely noticeable in that last, I'd say, minute of the game. And, granted, it was kind of like what I was saying with Mitchell Robinson. Obviously, if you just look at the stat sheet, it doesn't tell the entire story. Because I thought Mitchell Robinson put some great minutes out there. And if you were just to look at the stat sheet with Russell, you'd be like, what the hell? Like, Russell had an off night. But it's like you watch the intensity that he brought. That was big. They got two. Yeah, this game's over. Yep.
Oh, Terrence Mann with the dunk to end the game.
Phoenix is going to remember that one. Phoenix is going to remember that one going into game two.
That's a game.
Good road win for the Clippers, though.
Yep, definitely.
Like it was kind of like what I was saying at the top. It's like these road teams, man, they're getting it done in game one. They're taking advantage of it.
Yeah, we'll discuss that game as we get closer to the end, but we do have another game that we wanted to talk about, especially Kyle. This was Kyle's pick for the matchup of the weekend. This was the must-see game for him. So we're going to go right into the Warriors and the Kings game, the Battle of California. The Warriors, obviously, they are the defending NBA champions. They fall short to the young and emerging Sacramento Kings, 126-123, but not by the fault of anybody in particular. Steph Curry goes for 30. Klay has 21. It's the combined effort of the Splash Brothers, but I mean, when you counteract it with 38 by De'Aaron Fox, which is his postseason debut, and then Malik Monk off the bench goes for 32, it's a little hard to keep up. So, Kyle, I want to hear your thoughts on potentially one of the best series that is going to be ongoing throughout the remaining week, but what are your thoughts on how the Sacramento Kings performed in their first playoff game in 17 years?
Man, I thought they played extremely well. This was just one of those games where there was just an ebb and flow where Golden State in stretches had good runs where they were up 8 to 10 points, and then Sacramento would go on these nice little runs and end up closing the gap and then end up taking the lead. Pretty much, this is one of these games when I look at the Kings, they were able to handle the pressure of this moment extremely well, despite the fact that when it comes to the Kings, they haven't had a lot of playoff experience in almost 20 years. Like Kev said in the lead up, this is the first playoff game that they've had since 2006? It's the first time that they made the playoffs in 17 years. And when you have De'Aaron Fox almost drop a 40 bomb, you have Malik Monk drop over 30 points. You can't really ask much more from those two than what they gave in game one. And honestly, this is one of these games where I can't really criticize either team too heavily. It was a back and forth game. The Warriors were up most of the third quarter, and then the Kings go on this nice little run to close out the third quarter, end up taking a 1-point lead before going into the fourth quarter. And then they were just trading shots back and forth that entire fourth quarter. Kevin and I, we were watching this game, and just some of the shots that Steph was hitting were just ridiculous. We're talking about just like the narrowest of spaces against his defender, and he would just be able to drain these shots from 25 to 30 feet out. There was one shot that he hit with about 4 minutes left in the fourth quarter. He's in the corner. He basically catches it and tosses the ball up within a quarter of a second after receiving the pass and just drains it. And then there were just some step back shots that he hit were just utterly phenomenal. And Steph, had a great game, had 30 points in this game. Just, he was Steph. It's something that we've come accustomed to at this point. But I got to give the Kings a lot of credit in being resilient and weathering the storm against the Warriors. The Warriors have been here before. I mean, they've won 4 NBA titles since 2014. They're coming off of an NBA title last year. And the fact that De'Aaron Fox and the Kings were able to just go shot for shot with the Golden State Warriors, who are the defending NBA champions, got to give them a lot of credit. Now, going into game 2, I think if you're Golden State, I think you just fine-tune some things, tweak some things a little bit. I mean, they shot 32% behind the three-point line. The Kings shot 37%, so there's not that much of a difference. And Golden State shot almost 48% from the field. The only thing is, at the end of the game, Andrew Wiggins had an opportunity for the Warriors to give them the lead. Unfortunately, they couldn't knock down that shot late in the fourth quarter. And I wouldn't be surprised going into game 2 if we see a similar type of scenario play itself out in game 2. This is going to be one of those series where it's going to go back and forth. And I think at the end of the day, if Golden State can win some of these road games in Sacramento, which, to be quite honest with you, it's not much of a road game because, Sacramento and San Francisco are not that far from each other. But if they can find a way to go into that Kings Arena and pull off a road win, game 2 is it. If you could go back to San Francisco 1-1 apiece, that's big because Golden State has been pretty solid at home this year. It's just their road woes have been something that, to be quite honest with you, I don't think anybody expected it would be this bad to this magnitude. But like I said at the top, got to give a lot of credit to what the Kings did. Being down 10 points against Golden State and then coming back and then maintaining that lead to keep the distance from Golden State. Not a lot of teams can do that, but the Kings did, and I got to tip the cap to them. It's a solid effort for them in game 1, and we'll see whether or not that they can continue it going into game 2.
The Golden State Warriors are known, obviously, for their barrage of threes, their unique offense, and then, of course, the trio of Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and Steph Curry. The missing piece of this formula for the last game was Draymond had 4. He's not the most offensive efficient player as he used to be. Granted, he did have 11 assists. He had 2 steals. He had 9 boards. But he was 1 for 5 from the field. If you're going to be on the floor consistently, you also need to contribute on the offensive end. I'm not saying go and design plays for Draymond, but Steph and Klay are going to need a little bit of help. Klay did go 8 of 19, 5 for 14 from the three-point line, so there's improvement to be had there. But then you look at the rest of the supporting cast. Gary Payton II only had 8 points. Kuminga only had 8 points. Kevon Looney only had 8 points. And then Dante DiVincenzo only had 10. It was a shootout. It was a very, very close game. And the Warriors are also known for their third quarter barrage. They're the best third quarter team in the NBA, and they have been for quite some time over the last few seasons. The Kings were the ones that were able to rally in the third, similar to what Kyle said. The Warriors got up to a point where they were up double digits, and Sacramento not only cut that lead, they found a way to tie it, take the lead going into the fourth, and maintain that lead throughout the game to win a narrow margin. The third quarter scoring was broken down 36-29 in favor of Sacramento, and then in the fourth, 35-33 in favor of Sacramento again. When you talk about what happened with the Warriors, they also had 15 turnovers. Steph Curry had 5 of them. Draymond Green had 3 of them, and so on and so forth once again. So I'm looking at this and I'm saying Golden State has room for improvement, but when you go down to Sacramento, so do they. The supporting cast outside of just Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, he was 3 of 12. He only had 6. Keegan Murray, their rookie sensation who broke the all-time three-point record for rookies in the NBA, he only had 2. He was 1 of 5. Harrison Barnes, 5 of 11. He had 13. Domantas Sabonis, he had 12. And he was 5 of 17. So this is the scary part. We picked Golden State to win this series. Sacramento won this game by a narrow margin. If these players find a way to turn it around, and again, I'm not saying that they need to go out there and drop 30, but if they are more efficient from the field and they cut their turnover margin down, because again, Sabonis had 4 turnovers, De'Aaron Fox had 3 turnovers, the team as a whole had 13, so both teams are relatively similar in that regard, but you limit the turnovers for Sacramento, and then you find a way to be more efficient from the field, I believe that the Sacramento Kings can definitely take control of this series into a 2-0 lead going back to Golden State. This is going to be a series to monitor. As good as Steph was, as good as Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox were, it has to be the people that are supporting those individuals. I'm not saying Malik Monk isn't the same level of De'Aaron Fox or Steph Curry, but we expect Malik Monk to do a little bit more because of what he was able to do as a Laker, because of what he was able to do all season long. He has shown instances and he has had bursts of, or should I say, flashes of greatness, especially in that double, triple, quadruple overtime game, whatever the hell happened with the Clippers earlier this year, where both of them went for 40. And they were teammates in college. They've known each other for years. They're best friends. They play on the same team, and now they're in the postseason together for the first time in 17 years with an organization that has struggled and has been pretty much a mediocre franchise since Kyle and I were in middle school. So what I'm talking about here is I think Golden State needs to be careful because if this continues to get away from them with their struggles already on the road, that next game in Sacramento could get out of hand very quickly if these other role players start to step it up. I guarantee you Huerter's not going to go 3 of 12. Murray's going to go 1 of 5. And Sabonis, the second, if not third best player on this team, he is not going to have another night where he goes 5 of 17. So let's be honest. We give Golden State credit for keeping up where they did. But if Sacramento finds a way just to make those little tweaks, I mean, I don't know. This could end up being a gentleman's sweep because this stat line shows a lot to me. And it also showed a lot in that game where people were consistently out of rhythm, which also kept Golden State in that game.
I think the one thing that we have to keep in mind, though, is that this is game 1, is that teams are figuring each other out. And honestly, when it comes to Golden State and Sacramento, and honestly, you could apply this to the rest of the teams that are playing in the NBA playoffs, I don't think we're going to see the best version of these teams in the first game of these individual matchups. More than likely, the first game, we'll get a feel for it. Kind of get a feel for, how each team plays. We'll figure out some of the adjustments that they make. But more than likely, where I think the intensity is really going to ramp up is really when we hit that second to third game. I think usually after that second game, you're pretty accustomed to what the team is going to give you from an offensive and defensive perspective. And, after that, it's just, all right, who can make your shots? Who can get to your spots? Who could play better one-on-one defense? Who could play better zone defense? Just who can make the plays that need to be made when those pressure moments are on and the lights are shining brightest. We're going to see whether or not who's going to step up or not. And when it comes to Sacramento, yeah, they took the first one, but it's only game 1. And honestly, when it comes to Golden State can come right back in game 2 and tie this series 1-1 going back to San Francisco for game 3. it's just kind of weird that even though that it's technically a road game for Golden State,
It's
it's
not.
it's not. It's literally Sacramento and San Francisco are not that far from each other. So overall, I thought it was a fantastic game. It's just, Kev, I remember when we were watching those highlights of just Steph hitting some of those shots, and then the Kings going toe to toe with them, matching
Shot
those
for shot.
shots. Man, just all in all, it was a very entertaining game. And I know Sacramento's kind of got this whole social media thing going, but bro, light the beam, light the beam.
Yes, sir. And we're going to stay in Los Angeles for one of the teams. Obviously, the game took place in Memphis, Tennessee. But normally we go back and forth with segments. Since Kyle's team is in the playoffs, I'm going to give him back-to-back. So, Kyle, the Lakers go out, upset the Grizzlies, and they do it in very convincing fashion. Led
Mhm.
by the four
Kev,
players we discussed.
hold up. I don't think
What-
you said that with enough emphasis, bro. I'm being a little subjective here than normal, bro. What did I text you at the end of that game?
We outside!
Exactly, bro. Bro, we were
Safe to
we
say
were
Kyle's
doing
hyped.
100%. 100 because I
And
wasn't expecting it.
it wasn't like LeBron had to go out and drop 40. AD went out there and go for 35 and 20. This was a team effort across the board. Rui Hachimura goes for 29. Austin Reeves goes for 23. LeBron James goes for 22. And Anthony Davis goes for 23. I actually did that off of memory, and I hope I got that right. So let's double check. Anthony Davis 22. LeBron James 21. So I was close. Austin Reeves with 23 and Hachimura with 29. So I was off. I was wrong by one, and that was off memory. And D'Angelo Russell
That's
had 19.
It's still pretty good memory, bro. I'll give you that.
No,
I'm not gonna
I'll
I'm not
take
gonna
it where I
not
can
I'm not
get
gonna
it.
ding you for being off by 1 or 2 points.
I'll take it where I can get it. Now, John Morant got hurt. Nobody wishes injury upon anybody. And we hope for a speedy recovery because we want this series to be competitive. I know Kyle wants to win, but I'm pretty sure he's not going to want to win without beating the best of the best. So I will kick this to Kyle. What are your thoughts on how the Lakers performed as a unit against the Memphis Grizzlies?
I thought they played extremely well on the road in game 1 against Memphis. And obviously, I'll get to John Morant's injury because that definitely played a significant factor for the Grizzlies late in that game. But just to focus on the Lakers, I mean, to be quite honest with you, you look at the first half, the Lakers and the Grizzlies were trading buckets. The Lakers definitely got a better hand of the Grizzlies in that first quarter, but then the Grizzlies had a great second quarter. They almost scored 40 points in the second quarter. They really gave the Lakers fits going into the end of that first half. And then the Lakers responded extremely well in the third quarter by almost putting up 40 points respectively in the third quarter on their end against Memphis. And, the Lakers were up, a couple points, in stretches of that fourth quarter. And then obviously the main thing was John Morant suffering that hand injury, which essentially took all the wind out of the sails for the Grizzlies, and the Lakers never looked back. I think when it comes to the Lakers, the biggest surprise that the Lakers could look at was Rui Hachimura. Roy almost dropped 30 points. And when you look at him specifically, this is probably single-handedly the best game that he's probably played in his entire career. It's just because of the circumstance that he was in. This is his first playoff game as a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. And I don't think you could have asked anything more in the time that he was out there. He was out there for 30 minutes, and he damn near matched that with 29 points. And not only that, Austin Reeves, man, he was just unstoppable in that fourth quarter. He single-handedly took over the game late when the Lakers were making a huge push. Once John Morant left with that hand injury, he was just knocking down some mid-range jumpers. He was knocking down some wide-open three-point shots. Just, it got to the point where you had Austin Reeves saying to himself, "I'm him," just screaming it in Memphis. And mind you, this is the team that has LeBron James. And LeBron James is not saying I'm him, but you got Austin Reeves saying that. And that's a huge confidence boost, not only for Reeves, but just I imagine the Lakers as a whole. And then AD. It was a little scary at first because he went out with a shoulder stinger where it looked like his entire arm went dead after looked like I would say a small scuffle to try to get a rebound. I believe it's from Jaren Jackson Jr. I may have the player wrong, but nonetheless, It looked like AD was going down with another injury, but comes back later in the game, and he was huge. I mean, granted, he didn't lead the Lakers in scoring points, but I thought he was extremely effective on the defensive end. He had 7 blocks for the Lakers. And when you get that type of defensive performance from AD, if he drops you 20, 25 points, you're happy with that. But it's even another thing to get the amount of blocks that he got. He was extremely effective. And I thought LeBron James, he was just steadfast in this game. He's very consistent. This is not one of these games where LeBron had to put up 30, 35 points and single-handedly carried the Lakers to a victory. This was a very well-rounded effort from the Lakers. And it was a huge road win for them in game 1. Now, obviously, when it comes to Memphis, the biggest thing is, what is Ja Morant's status going into game 2? Left with the hand injury. From what I've seen with the reports, the x-rays on his hand came back negative. I still imagine that he's probably sprained his hand, or he's definitely going to have a pretty decent sized bruise, and that hand is probably going to be swollen over the next couple of days. So the biggest thing is he's going to have to manage his recovery as soon as possible. Obviously, if you have Ja Morant on the court, he's a difference maker for the Grizzlies. Now, the Grizzlies have shown in the past to play pretty well without him, but when it comes to the playoffs, you're definitely going to need him out there, because you just can't roll the dice not having him out there on the court unless the injury is just too big to overcome. And I will say, the Grizzlies got some pretty solid contributions without Ja Morant. I mean, when you look at Jaren Jackson Jr., he had 31 points and gave the Lakers fits. And I think if you're the Grizzlies, you feed him once again, because it seemed like the Lakers didn't have a good answer for him once he got into a rhythm. I mean, not only was he good down low in the painted area, but he was knocking down some jump shots and even some 3-pointers. So I think if you're the Grizzlies, if you don't have Ja Morant going into game 2, you feed Jaren Jackson Jr. and you try to get a similar type of performance that you got from him in game 1. But they're going to have to focus on these other guys, these other role players, to be able to step up and make some big-time plays. Desmond Bane, Dillon Brooks, Luke Kennard, like, these guys are going to have to step up big if Ja Morant is going to potentially miss game 2, because the Lakers may smell blood in the water if Ja's going to be out for the foreseeable future. And if the Lakers sense that, they're going to try to go up 2-0 in that series. And game 3 goes back to LA. If the Lakers are potentially up 2-0 in that series, the Grizzlies are going to be in some trouble. But I think all eyes are focused on Ja Morant's status going into game 2. But looking back at this game 1 for the Lakers, this was a very well-rounded performance. You got multiple players scoring over 20 points. I don't think there's really much more that you could ask for. And we'll see whether or not that they can continue that momentum going into game 2.
I'm excited to see that the Lakers put up a fight, first and foremost. After the performance of barely scraping away with a win against Minnesota in that play-in game, I was very skeptical and very nervous to think that Memphis wasn't going to run it away, or run away with it, should I say. But I didn't think that the Lakers would come out as hot as they did. When you're talking about efficiency, 53% from the field as a team, over 43% from 3, 87.5% from the free throw line, and they had less than 15 turnovers. That is incredible basketball. Albeit your superstars didn't have to carry you because a lot of people contributed. That is how basketball should be played. I'm not expecting everybody to have incredible games like this moving forward on a consistent basis throughout a 7-game series. But when you talk about Hachimura having his best game of the season, when you talk about Austin Reeves and the heat that he's been on, or should I say on the streak that he has been on as of late in the second half of the season, where he's been gaining a lot of confidence, which obviously probably led to him saying, "I am him." The acquisition of D'Angelo Russell, the defensive presence, which also was an acquisition of Jared Vanderbilt and also Malik Beasley and a list of other players. Everybody did their role. Everybody fulfilled the assignment. And what it looked to me was, if everybody is eating, the Lakers will win. If you have to rely solely on the availability and performance of Anthony Davis and LeBron James, I believe that is when this team starts to struggle. A lot of people have said you have to surround LeBron James in terms of successful teams with shooters, because LeBron is able to drive and kick the pick and roll between Anthony Davis when they start to double and collapse on Anthony like they did in the first half before he got injured. Yeah, people got to knock down shots. Someone's open. We always talk about if someone's getting doubled, there's a man open at all times on the floor. It's going to cause a rotation, a shift. Someone's going to have to scramble. You kick out to the next person. They may be open, or they may be able, to drive it in and get it a more efficient shot, or at least go to the free throw line. So overall, as a cast, as a team, the Los Angeles Lakers played not perfect basketball, but they played a very good game, especially for a 7 seed going up against a 2 seed. I believe that the Lakers can take this momentum and use it throughout the remainder of this series. I'm not saying that it's going to go be a sweep. I'm not saying they're going to take the next one. It also depends on Ja's health, but I'll get to the Grizzlies in a moment. This is exactly what Los Angeles needed to make this postseason run that everybody says that they're going to go on because of the, I guess, health of LeBron James. But Anthony Davis did suffer that stinger. We don't know the measure or the measure. We don't know the significance of the injury. We don't know if that's going to affect him long term. We don't know if that's going to hinder him from playing as effective as he did down the stretch. But he also did have 7 blocks. So overall, I think the Lakers performed very well, and that is why they won this game. Going into Memphis, Desmond Bane in the first half was hitting some crazy shots. Desmond Bane at one point, I believe, went on a 7, if not 8-0 run by himself, back-to-back threes and one. And then I'm just sitting here like, oh man, here comes Memphis. Like, oh man, the Lakers are in trouble. Mind you, I'm not even a Laker fan, but obviously for the sake of my dad and my brother and Kyle, like I have a lot of Laker family friends. I have a lot of family members that are Laker fans. So I always want to see them do good. And then, like I said, Ja Morant goes down in that fourth quarter, 5 or so minutes left. And it's like the sail of the Memphis Grizzlies ship was just knocked over or was ripped. All momentum was gone. It almost looked like Memphis was lost on offense. And that just, it wasn't a good look. Jaren Jackson Jr. had, I believe, 19 points either in the first quarter or the first half. I can't remember which one, but he was cooking. And the offense kind of should have continued to be fed through him. And it looked like it wasn't in that fourth quarter. You know, you have to look for your second options. You have to find people that are going to be able to get you shots. Luke Kennard, somebody that has been talked about a religious amount of time since being acquired by Memphis, who, while as a Memphis Grizzly, he shot over 50% from 3. He only had 5 shots in total, 4 threes. I mean, I get it. He had a plus 11 on the plus minus, but you got to get someone like that a little bit more involved because shooters like that can win you games and they can make defenses have to completely collapse on him. And again, same method. You're going to rush into the shooter, someone's going to be open. I think that the Grizzlies are going to have to figure out a way to combat this struggle. And if Ja Morant is going to miss some time, they are going to need to make some adjustments. But I don't know how they're going to do that because I don't know if Tyus Jones is going to be able to get it done for you at the backup role. I don't know if Dillon Brooks is going to be able to carry any more weight. I mean, the only thing he's been carrying is his mouth in the press conferences and all these other interviews that he's been getting and all these quotes that he's been talking about. He was 5 of 13 from the field, 2 of 9 from 3. So overall, Memphis is going to have to find a different source of offense if Ja does, in fact, miss some time. But in terms of how they collapsed in that second half, it did not look very good, and the Lakers were able to pull away. So definitely a shaky 2 seed right now for Memphis. They did not look good at all. And like Kyle keeps saying, it's only game 1. But overall, if Memphis continues this style of play, don't be surprised if LA comes out with this series victory.
I think to me, it's just what is going to happen with Ja. And obviously, the best that I can tell you guys right now, based off the X-ray report, is that his X-rays came back negative. But, you know, that means he just didn't break his hand. But nonetheless, it's probably a sprain. But, you know, if you're dealing with a hand sprain, and obviously I know we'll get to somebody that suffered more than just a hand sprain in a little bit, but, you know, how viable is that shooting hand going to be? Or how viable is, like, when you're going through your rotation on your shot, you know, is that going to be a factor when it's not only that, it's like, imagine just catching passes, you know, when you're dealing with some swelling in your hand. I mean, you could be able to mitigate it as much as possible, and you may be able to do that to a certain extent. But something you're going to feel the pressure of that swelling on your hand. And, you know, when it comes to Ja, obviously, you know, Ja is one of the most athletic point guards I've ever seen. But in this instance where he drove to the basket and he's in midair and basically all you have to brace your fall is your hand, and with the speed that he was coming down with, I'm not surprised by the fact that unfortunately for him, he went down with that injury. But, you know, that's kind of the double-edged sword that comes with the athleticism that he displays. You can have these huge highlight moments where you bang on somebody for this major poster dunk. But if you're going one-on-one against somebody and they actually stand their ground defensively, that speed's going to go somewhere, and gravity is going to just pull you back down to the court. And those hardwood floors, Kev, they are not forgiving.
Hell no, not at that height, not that speed. It's we've talked about this as well as a number of professional media outlets. Sometimes that athleticism is going to get you hurt. You know, we always talk about Derrick Rose, Russell Westbrook, and all these other athletic players in history of the NBA. Look what happened to D Rose. Him crow hopping and the way that he did, as aggressively as he did, as high as he used to jump. Unfortunately, he doesn't have knees anymore. Granted, he is significantly older now, but it affected his career religiously to where he was always hurt. Ja Morant, if you continue to take off the way that you are, and I'm not discrediting his game, I'm not pretending like I'm not athletic or anything like that. I'm just saying there's moments like this. There's no safety net. There's no cushion. If you're going to continue to try to take off, the risk of getting injured is significantly higher, because unless someone's willing to catch you as you're falling, that is something you have to be mindful of. And it is the postseason, and the best availability is availability. What's the quote again?
The best ability is availability.
That one. If Ja Morant's going to miss time like he did last season, like he did in the playoffs, he's going to have his own narrative of maybe the style of play he has, maybe his game needs to change. So we will see what happens as that progresses. But again, something to be mindful of as this series progresses.
It just seemed as if when Ja left that game, just the air in the arena in Memphis just fizzled out. It was gone. Mm-hmm. And I think LA went on like this huge run to close out the game. I think they went like a 15-0 run to win. Yeah. It was bad.
Nuts.
So, and the game was still relatively close at one point. You know, even when Ja was not on the court. And then, you know, once the Lakers were just knocking down shots and the Grizzlies couldn't match it.
It was a wrap.
It was over. So,
yeah,
you know, good for the Lakers, you know, getting a huge road win, and we'll see whether or not that they can continue it going into game 2. But after that, I think we only have
2 more.
We do have 2 more games. But guess what, Kev?
Yeah, my boy.
Go talk about that, dude.
Yes, sir.
Go talk
Timothy
about
Butler.
Talk about playoff Jimmy.
Playoff Jimmy.
Bro, yes, I know you've been waiting for this one. So,
hell yeah.
But no, we'll give Kev his moment to shine here. We'll talk about the Miami Heat going on the road and getting a huge upset victory over the Milwaukee Bucks. They defeated the Bucks by the score of 130 to 117. Excuse me, 117. Jimmy Butler obviously is the star of the show, no doubt about it. Played 43 minutes, played damn near the whole game, put up 35 points, 5 rebounds, 11 assists. On top of that, you had some great scores alongside Jimmy. You had Bam Adebayo with 22 points of his own. You had Gabe Vincent knocking down some 3-point shots. He had 15 points. You had Caleb Martin knocking down some 3-point shots. He had 15 points. Kevin Love getting big shots off for Miami. He dropped
playoff Kev.
He was knocking down some 3-point shots. He ended up getting 18 points as well. But obviously the biggest story that we take away from this game was Giannis Antetokounmpo leaving relatively early in the first half. What seemed to be a lower body injury, more than likely it's probably a bruised tailbone. Took a pretty hard fall early in the first half, left the game for a little bit, came back for a couple minutes, but was no longer able to continue. I think before even halftime, I think they had announced that he wasn't going to come back into the game. But the injury bug also plagued the Miami Heat in this game. And this was a far more significant injury than what Giannis sustained as far as what we know right now. Tyler Hero went down with a broken hand late in the first half, really with only about seconds left before halftime. And he knew it immediately. He actually tried to go to the locker room, wasn't able to be subbed out because it was an ongoing play or they had to do a side out. And he ended up actually taking a shot with a broken hand. Damn near drained the shot. But nonetheless, you lose Tyler Hero, who's been one of their star players over the last couple of years. That is a big loss for Miami. Not only for game 1, but potentially for the rest of the series and potentially for the rest of the playoffs, depending on if they can get past Milwaukee in this series. So the injuries in this game in particular really stand out. I know Kev will have a bunch to say about this, but I guess we'll just focus it on the game itself. I know Kev will talk about the injuries, but Kev, I got to get your thoughts. What did you think about the Miami Heat? Excuse me. What did you think about the Miami Heat going on the road and getting this huge upset victory over the Bucks in Game 1?
I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I called it. Kyle and I thought that this was going to be pretty clear cut and concise, but then again, we also picked Chicago to win. So our opinions are pretty crappy lately. Our reputation does not precede us well. But from a game standpoint, a basketball, I mean, man, Miami came out and they shot the lights out, bro. They found a way to do things at an efficient clip, almost historical. At some point, some would say they shot 60%. I can't speak English. They shot 60% from three. When the hell does that ever happen? Let alone 50%, 60. They were knocking down everything. The basket probably looked about yay wide. It was absolutely incredible to watch in terms of, like I said, from a basketball standpoint. And it just, Jimmy Butler does not get enough credit. Jimmy Butler always finds ways to turn it up in the playoffs, carry a team emotionally, lead them to victory. And the narratives behind him barely spoke about. The narratives, of course, in this game are going to be Giannis and Tyler Hero's injuries, but minus the injuries, they'll find a way to talk about Chris Middleton. They'll find a way to talk about what Miami has to do to continue this run. But they're not going to circle on Jimmy Butler going for 35 and 11. We talked about this on a multitude of episodes over the last couple of seasons. Jimmy Butler finds a way to always will a team, no matter if it was Chicago, if it was Minnesota, if it was Philly. It didn't matter. Jimmy Butler always got the best out of his teammates. Bam Adebayo had the best game of the playoffs, including the play-in tournament. He had 22, 9, and 7. Bam Adebayo was also a guy that got beat up against Atlanta just a few days ago, and he let Clint Capella go for 21, 22 rebounds. He found a way to get himself inserted into this offense, get himself into a rhythm, in a routine, distribute the ball, and at the same time be efficient from the floor. Jimmy Butler, with those 11 assists, found a way to get a lot of people open between Gabe Vincent, Strus, Kevin Love, and so many other people, to where it was such a team effort. It didn't matter who shot the ball because everybody was doing well. And if Tyler Hero doesn't go down, this may be an even bigger blowout. A 130 to 117 game on their home floor. Yes, their best player was not available. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like Giannis Antetokounmpo does not matter. But this game was close for a long time until the latter half of the fourth quarter. My brother and I were watching it at my parents' house, and Miami would score a couple points. Chris Middleton would knock down a shot. Bobby Portis would then knock down a shot. Then Gabe Vincent goes back-to-back and ones. And then you drive down the floor, Brook Lopez gets a layup. It was literally the epitome of like a ping pong game. It was score, 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 score. Like, it was a really entertaining game. Milwaukee ends up getting cold at the worst time. Miami continues their hot streak. They blow the door open in the fourth quarter to where the lead expands, and it ends up going to the Miami Heat. I don't really understand what happened, to be honest with you. Like I said, it started to become bad shot selection for the Bucks, but overall, from an overall game standpoint, I really thought that this was really fun to watch, just because shots were falling, especially if you're a Heat fan. Unfortunate for Bucks fans, it didn't go your way. I'm looking at their stat sheet outside of Chris Middleton. Everybody really had a decent contribution. Bobby had 21. Grayson had 12. Drew Holiday had 16 and 7 rebounds. Brook Lopez had 10. So, I mean, everybody found a way to help, but everybody already knows this team lives and dies with Giannis Antetokounmpo's success. If he's on the floor, this may be a whole different game. This may be a whole different discussion. We may be even saying Milwaukee blows out Miami. Who knows? Giannis is known for more than just his ability to dunk on people, more than just his ability to finish in transition. He's also a former Defensive Player of the Year. He affects shots in the paint. He alters shots in the paint. So maybe Miami wouldn't have been as efficient as they was, but overall, I thought for a 1-8 seed, that was more entertaining than I could have possibly imagined. And for Miami to come out with the win and have an injury of their own, I think that that's going to speak a lot of volume to Eric Spoelstra, how he coaches. And again, Jimmy Butler getting his flowers. I'm about tired of people telling me that Jimmy Butler's an average basketball player, because when it matters most, Jimmy Butler always shows up, and that is proven once again, knocking down the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference.
Well, when it comes to the Heat, this is something that you dream about, getting that first road game win to start off the series. And essentially, if you're trying to steal a game, this was definitely one that you went with, especially once Giannis went out with that lower back injury. More than likely, it's probably a bruised tailbone. But when it came to the Heat, Kev, Kev, you could tell me if I'm wrong here. Did the Heat not get off to a hot start right from the word go? I mean, they were on fire to start off that game. And that was despite the fact that Giannis was out there on the court early on before he suffered that lower back injury. Obviously you could say, well, let's say hypothetically, Giannis had stayed in the game. Obviously, I think his impact would have probably taken over that game at some point in favor of Milwaukee. But, when he went out with that lower back injury, it had to fall on the shoulders of, guys like Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday, and Bobby Portis to be able to carry the load. They just fell a little bit short. But when it came to the Heat, man, Jimmy Butler stepped up. Not only that, I thought Kevin Love stepped up huge. Bam Adebayo had a great game. This was a game that, honestly, I thought the Heat controlled right from the word go. And it just continued the entire course of the game. The only thing that I'm going to focus on in a negative aspect when it comes to Miami is, unfortunately, they lost Tyler Hero in this game. Suffered a broken hand. And I remember when TNT was doing their halftime report, just to kind of brush everybody up on what the injury statuses were for Giannis and Tyler Hero. I think we'd already known that Giannis was probably going to be out for the rest of the game, especially when he went back into the game for a couple of minutes after he initially suffered that lower back injury and then just decided he couldn't keep going in that game. Probably just went back into the locker room just to get treatment. But the biggest shock to me was the fact that they had already confirmed that Tyler Hero had broke his hand. And that's going to have a major consequence at going against the Heat moving forward in this series, because when you look at Tyler Hero is one of their 3-point specialists, and he can get into a huge rhythm offensively for them. And, when you lose somebody like that could drop you 25 to 30 points on a consistent basis, that is going to hurt. Because when he went down with that injury, he had 12 points in the first half. He was probably well on his way to getting at least a 20 to 25 point performance with the Heat. It's just, it's really unfortunate that he suffered that injury right before halftime, because he was only probably about 30 to 45 seconds from being able to go into the locker room healthy. It's just, that's going to have a huge impact for the Heat moving forward. And, it's going to be on the shoulders of Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and the role players that the Miami Heat have at their disposal. They're going to have to look at guys like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, and Caleb Martin to be able to step up huge and be able to knock down shots consistently to stay competitive against the number one seed in the Milwaukee Bucks. And even, you could look at guys like Kyle Lowry and Kevin Love. These are experienced guys. They have some championship pedigree, definitely with Kevin Love. I know Kyle Lowry as well. But, these guys are going to have to step up huge, and they're really going to have to show off that championship pedigree to be able to replace somebody like Tyler Hero. And when it comes to the Bucks, I think the Bucks, even though they lost this game, I think they can move forward with a little bit of, I'm not going to say sympathy, but at least some positive thoughts going into game 2. When you look at Chris Middleton has been battling injuries pretty much this entire year. His knee's been bothering him pretty much the last couple of months. And, going into the end of the regular season, the Bucks decided to sideline him to focus on improving his health in his knee. And the fact that he was this effective in game 1, really showing some old flashes of what Chris Middleton did just a couple years ago when the Bucks were on their way to winning a championship against the Phoenix Suns. It was great to see him not only play well, but play extremely well in putting up a 30-point performance. And then you could look at guys like Drew Holiday coming up pretty big with the amount of assists that he was getting. It was just utterly ridiculous. And then Bobby Portis coming off the bench and providing good minutes as well. It's just, Miami had a lead pretty much the entire course of the game. The Bucks would chip away at it, maybe get it to about 4 to 5 points, and then the Heat would go on 5-6, 7-0 run and make it a 10-point plus deficit for the Bucks. So going into game 2 for the Bucks, they're going to have to try to improve not turning the ball over. One of the things that I could take away from this game, this happened to the Bucks, but it happened to the Heat as well, was the amount of offensive fouls that happened in this game. Both teams were doing a great job in forcing an offensive foul against the opposing team. And I think when it comes to the Bucks, unfortunately, they had too many in this game that they could look back to and try to improve those mistakes going into game 2. But they got to improve their 3-point percentage. They were atrocious in this game as far as I saw it. They were 11 of 45 I know they only made 11 threes in this game, and they were only making about 25% of their 3-point shots. That is not something that you want in the first game going into the first round of the playoffs. And the Bucks are a pretty solid team shooting behind the 3-point line compared to what we have seen, or really what we've seen this entire year. It's just it didn't show in this first playoff game. It seemed like the Bucks, I think they were a little bit rusty. They had a week off before they went into this game, and I think the rust showed a little bit. And I think Miami, being the more consistent team as far as playing more recently, it definitely showed early on, and they just showed their consistency throughout the entirety of the game. So there's a lot of adjustments that the Bucks are going to have to make. They're going to have to knock down their 3-point shots. They had open opportunities. They just couldn't knock them down. And depending on what the status of Giannis is going into game 2, if he doesn't play, it's going to have to be a group effort to go up against a team like the Heat. And I know the Heat, even though they lost Tyler Hero, they can go into game 2 potentially going up 2-0 in that series, going back to Miami for game 3, which would be just monumental for them to take that back to Miami. So overall, great game from Jimmy Butler. Really saw playoff Jimmy shine brightest here. And depending on what happens with Giannis, the Bucks are going to have to really form a group effort. They're going to have to be a cohesive unit going into game 2 if they're going to try to even the series 1-1 apiece before we go to game 3 in Miami.
I mean, I got to ask, Kyle, is this becoming a rivalry? This is the third time in 4 years these teams have faced off in the playoffs.
Yep.
And if I'm not mistaken, Miami swept them 1 year.
So
then Milwaukee went in 5, and this is their third time.
Yeah, so when they were in the bubble, I believe the Heat had played the Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then the Heat won that series to move on to play the Lakers in the finals and ended up losing that series. Last year, both teams had met, I believe, in the...
I don't think it was last year. I think it was the year the Bucks won the championship 2 years ago.
Oh, 2 years ago. Yeah, you're right. That was the year that
Giannis
the Bucks
won.
beat the Bucks beat Phoenix. But no, and then you have that series, the Bucks win that one pretty handily. And then you have this series, which honestly, Kev, the way that I see it is this whole series has been flipped upside down based on the injuries. That's the most prevalent takeaway, or that's the priority I take away from this game. It's like,
I agree.
Yeah, the Heat won, but at what cost? Now
you could say the same thing about the Bucks. I mean, they lost, but I mean, a bruised tailbone. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know what that feels like. I have fallen on my ass before a multitude of times. Maybe I've had it before, but I'm no doctor. Giannis looked like he was in such visible pain to the point where he was like, I just can't do this.
He was in some discomfort. There's no doubt about that. But I will say, I think a bruised tailbone. Did you hear that?
Is that thunder?
Yeah, there's like a massive thunderstorm going through, and that
yeah,
one
I
just
hear
kind of
that.
caught
Yeah, it was just raining down here too. That's crazy.
Yeah, that definitely caught my attention. So, if you guys happen to hear thunder in the background, I apologize for Mother Nature. She's showing up late tonight. So, I wish there was somebody showing up late, but we're not going to talk about that.
Stupid.
But overall, just to get back on point, I think when it comes to Giannis suffering a tailbone injury compared to what Tyler Hero suffered in a broken hand, it's a night and day difference.
Yeah.
You know, Tyler's going to be out probably potentially, 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how bad the fracture is. And I mean, and even hypothetically, if the Heat were to go all the way to the finals, which I don't think anybody is expecting unless you're performing miracles. Yeah, they'd have to perform some freaking miracles to get this team to the finals. But I don't know if he would be available by then. I mean, granted, we're in April. We're in the middle of April, and the finals pretty much wrap up in the middle of June. Depending on how bad that fracture is, I don't even know if he'd be available for a potential finals run. So it's really unfortunate for Tyler. He was playing pretty good basketball up until that point. But it's going to come down to what's going to happen with Giannis. Because I think Tyler's not going to play for the rest of the series. That's over and done with. But there's a chance that Giannis can recover from this. And they don't play again until Wednesday. Game 2 is on Wednesday.
Why so far out?
That's the way that they have it set up. I mean,
I
got to say, this is like the NHL hockey playoffs are about to start this week. Kev, they're playing on literally a day rest. That's it. So, like, hypothetically, if game one were to start for whatever sort of hockey team that's in the playoffs, they'd play on Sunday and then they play on Tuesday. You get 1 day of rest. That's it. Honestly, that's the way that I think it should be. But the fact that
Yeah, it is
you
what it
get
is.
three,
What are you gonna do?
you get 2 days of rest between games, I don't know about that. Because honestly, if these series go to 7 games, bro, this series wouldn't technically finish till May. That's how far this thing goes. If it
No,
were to go all the way to
I'm
game 7, it's
I'm good off that. That is,
yeah,
granted, I am all for long series. You know what I'm saying? If all the series were to go 7, I'm not going to sit here and be upset. I don't think any NBA fan is going to be. But to drag it out to where it's 2-3 weeks long, that's a little too much.
yeah.
But with that being said, we have our last game to cover, which was the game that went final a few minutes ago, which is the LA Clippers. I guess you can say providing the upset because they are the 5 seed, beating the Phoenix Suns at home, 115-110. Now in this game, Kawhi Leonard goes off for 38 points. There's no Paul George, and they're looking to kind of find their identity without him. And Russell Westbrook goes and has an absolutely atrocious night from the field, going 3 of 19. But as Kyle and I narrated as it happened, coming up with some key defensive plays, he guarded Kevin Durant in the first quarter, kind of gave him a little bit of a headache, and then blocking Devin Booker athletically in that fourth quarter to where he was also able to throw the ball off of Devin, force it the other way. Russell made up for it in other aspects. So Kyle, I'm kicking this one your way. What are your thoughts on what I thought was going to be the game of the week on the Western Conference side with LA coming up with the upset?
This was a great win for the Clippers. And honestly, it's really been this trend that we've seen in these first round games where a lot of these road teams have taken advantage of the circumstances and have gone out on the road and have got these huge road wins to start off 1-0 in the series. And when it comes to the Clippers, job well done as far as I see it. This was something that I noticed early on in this game was the Clippers got off to a very good start. They outscored the Suns 30-18 in the first quarter. Granted, the Suns made a comeback in the second quarter, and honestly, it continued into the third quarter where the Suns ended up taking the lead. But honestly, when I look back at this game, it was just Kawhi Leonard, man. Kawhi Leonard has been playing some phenomenal basketball in the second half of the year. And that momentum has just carried itself into the playoffs. Kawhi was out there for 42 minutes. You cannot say that they were low managing him in this game, putting up 42 minutes on those knees. He did what he needed to do, dropping 38 points along with 5 rebounds and 5 assists. He's Kawhi. He's the claw, and he showed up exactly with what the Clippers needed. But the one thing that I noticed about the Clippers in this game was, man, they were getting some wide open 3-point opportunities throughout the entire course of the game. That could be in part that the Clippers are just running good offensive strategies. They're setting up guys to get wide open shots. That could be the fact that the Suns aren't switching. They're not hitting the right defensive strategies properly. But nonetheless, I saw Eric Gordon open many times for some wide open 3-point shots. Nicholas Batum was open for 3-point shots. Kawhi Leonard was open for 3-point shots. Even though Russell had a terrible night, he was 3 of 19 from the field. Even he was getting some open looks. Just he couldn't knock them down. But overall, when I look at this game, it was very competitive from beginning to end. Both teams went on good respective stretches. I thought the Suns had some opportunities that they squandered, especially in the fourth quarter, and that Kawhi Leonard took advantage of. Essentially, he went on a stretch where he knocked down back-to-back threes that took, I think, the point margin from what the Clippers had to 109 to 115 that really kind of widened their lead late in the fourth quarter over the Suns. And the Suns just couldn't knock down shots late in the fourth quarter to get over the hump to get this home win for game one. So overall, when I look at this game, great road win by the Clippers. I thought Kawhi played an outstanding game. When it comes to the Suns, they definitely left some plays out there. A lot of their shots, I think, were just relatively short. It seemed like Chris Paul was missing shots short. Devin Booker was missing shots short. Kevin Durant actually got off to a very slow start in this game. Did not score any points in the first quarter. Definitely ramped it up after that, but you could definitely tell that the Suns just seemed like they were not in rhythm to start off the game. Granted, they got their legs underneath them after that first quarter. But man, had they gotten off to a better start in the first quarter compared to what they did, I think there's a very good chance that they could have walked away with this game with a victory instead of a loss in this occasion. So, listen, it's game one. Both teams are still figuring things out. I think the intensity of this series will only ramp up the farther we go into the series. I think by game 2 or game 3, you're really going to see the best versions of these teams going against each other. Both teams are still figuring each other out. They have to match the intensity or try to match the overall level of play when they're going up against each other. And I think we will see a much more competitive Suns team than we saw in game 1 when we reach game 2. It's just, I don't think the Suns put out their best effort in game 1. I think the Clippers did exactly what they tried to do as far as a game plan. I think they executed it at a high level. And when it comes to game 2, we'll see whether it can continue in favor of the Clippers, or we'll see whether or not that the Suns can get this series a 1-1 when we go back to game 3 in LA. But overall, great win for the Clippers to start out this series.
I'm going to be a little bit more concerned to an extent because there was an outlier in this game, and that was Torrey Craig going for 22. I'm not trying to be an ass, but I don't remember the last time Torrey Craig had a meaningful game in any playoff game he's, performed in. And Chris Paul had 7, Devin had 26, KD had 27. I don't think Torrey's going to have another game like that. So does that mean that Kevin Durant has to go for 40? Does that mean Devin Booker's got to go for 30? Does that mean CP3's got to go for 15 and 12 every game? I truly and honestly don't know, because when you look at the bench had a total of 10 points. And that came from Shamet with 4, Landale with 4, and Biyombo with 2. This is exactly what everybody feared when you traded for Kevin Durant. You lost your depth. And not to mention, with Cam Payne out with some lower back spasms, who's supposedly already rumored to be missing game 2, I don't know what Phoenix is going to do if they have another inefficient night from Chris Paul. The Clippers, on the other hand, go for the complete opposite, and at least they get some contributions from the bench, albeit they didn't have somebody go for almost 40, or excuse me, they didn't have anybody go for 30 points just like Kawhi did, but they got 14 from Powell, they got 10 from Mann, they went and got 19 from Gordon, 12 from Zubac. Kawhi Leonard obviously had 38, like I said, but Batum only had 3 shot attempts, but he only had 3 points, and then I don't think Russell Westbrook has another inefficient game like this where he puts up 19 shots and only makes 3 of them. The Clippers may be in a position to where this is the formula that you need to do. You let Kevin Durant do what he needs to do, but you got to limit everybody else's open looks. I know KD had 27 and Devin had 26, but you got to live with that because they're going to get their shots no matter what. Kevin and Devin are going to find their ways to get themselves to the elbow, find a way to get to the free throw line, hit some big timely shots. But everybody else got to find a way to step up for Phoenix. And by everybody else, I mean I don't even know a lot of these players. I mean, I don't know who Landale is. I don't know who Okogie is. I don't know who Wainwright is. Like, everybody knows who Bismack Biyombo is, but that's not somebody on the offensive side that I'm really worried about. And then Landry Shamet, again, isn't somebody on the offensive side that I'd be concerned with either. Why is TJ Warren not getting any minutes? Isn't TJ Warren the guy that popped off in the bubble for like 2 or 3 50-point games? Isn't that the guy that was playing pretty efficiently for Indiana prior to his injury? That's somebody that can provide offense. Somebody that can give you some good minutes. Unless he's hurt or unless he has just completely declined since acquiring him, I don't necessarily know why Phoenix didn't play him. If they needed some offense, they should have relied a little bit deeper on that bench since he got a DMP. But like Kyle said, the game started off slow for Phoenix. First quarter breakdown, obviously 30-18 in favor of the Clippers. Then it crisscrosses and flops. Then it is 29-36 in favor of Phoenix, 22-27 in favor of Phoenix in the third. And then LA goes off for 34-29 of the Suns in favor of the Clippers. So this game was the definition of back and forth, shot for shot. It looked like the Clippers were going to run away with this, and obviously Phoenix claws back. But again, to me, this is a little bit more concerning for Phoenix. You go out and you get Kevin Durant. You were 8-0 with him in the starting lineup. But when you face a team that has a pretty good defender, or should I say one of the best defenders when available in Kawhi Leonard, in a pretty solid and deep team in the Clippers, this may be the kryptonite for the Suns. I know I picked the Suns to win this in 7, but if all they're going to do is be able to provide points from their starters, unless they're all hitting you with 20 points, and even at that, it's still not going to be enough. I don't know if the Phoenix Suns are going to be able to win this series if they continue to struggle from the field. But again, I keep relying on what my partner said. This is game one. There will be adjustments. We know that Monty Williams is one of the best coaches in the NBA. And again, when you have Kevin Durant, your opportunity to win is always there. So I'm curious to see what adjustments are going to be made in that second game. This was a great game. Probably one of the better days, or should I say, one of the better games of the weekend as well, but definitely not a disappointment. Both in the East and the Western Conference, the 4 or 5 seeds, those are going to be the games to watch anyway. So definitely not disappointed.
Yeah, I think overall it was impressive to see Kawhi just so efficient from the field. It just really, when we've seen Kawhi Leonard really like return to form, especially in the second half of the regular season. Um, just the momentum that he's taking from the regular season and bringing into the playoffs, it really is a sight to behold because, it's been a while since we've seen Kawhi in the playoffs.
2 years.
And, you know, with this being the first game that he's back in a playoff format, and almost drops a 40 bomb on the road. First game. It's a little unsettling for the Suns, I can tell you that. But I imagine if you're the Clippers, you're probably feeling pretty solid going into game two, knowing that he could put that type of performance out there on the court and play at a high level. And it's like I said earlier, he's not getting any load management now. I can tell you that. Putting over 40 minutes. So, and that's despite the fact that they don't have Paul George. If they had Paul George in this game, this could have been a runaway. Potentially. I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
But
I would say so, 100%.
yeah, but I think they already confirmed that he's not going to play in this
He's
series.
out for this series, yeah.
So that's a big loss on not being able to have him available. But it seems like they're handling business so far up to this point. And we'll see whether or not that they can continue it into game two. And we'll see whether or not that KD, Dev, CP3, and DeAndre Ayton can be able to bounce back in game two. Try to even the series at 1-1 apiece before we go back to game three. But
Yes, sir.
with that said, we are going to wrap up the episode with just some of the other games that we saw throughout this weekend. There's only 2 other games that will hit real quick. Um, Kev, do you want to do it like this? I will just summarize the Nets and 76ers game, and you can summarize the Hawks and Celtics game. You want to do that?
Yeah, that works for me.
All right. So, first things first, I will go over the 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets game. This was a very business-like win for the 76ers. I know Kev got a laugh out of that when I was on the phone with him saying that this was a business type
That
win
was hilarious.
for the 76ers. It was a very good win for the 76ers. They won by the score of 121 to 101 over the Brooklyn Nets. Really, when you look at this game from top to bottom, when it came to Philadelphia, they got great contributions across the board from their top scorers. Joel Embiid led the way for the 76ers with 26 points. He had 5 rebounds, 3 assists. The second leading scorer was James Harden. He had 23 points. He had 4 rebounds, but he had 13 assists. He was facilitating quite well throughout that game. Tobias Harris also had a solid game. He had 21 points, had 4 rebounds, 4 assists. And then Tyrese Maxey had a nice little 13 spot with 6 rebounds and 3 assists. Obviously, when it comes to the Brooklyn Nets, they don't have KD. They don't have Kyrie Irving. But they got a good game out of Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges was traded for. He was traded in that trade with KD. He dropped a nice little 30-piece for them. He's been playing absolutely sensational ever since arriving in Brooklyn. And honestly, I think when it comes to Mikal Bridges, he is somebody that I think we have underrated in his ability to be able to not only score effectively, but to score at what seems to be almost like a superstar level at times. I'm not saying that he's
100%.
undeniably a superstar, but with the way that he has been playing with Brooklyn, there may be a changing narrative or a changing conversation about what Mikal Bridges can do in the NBA. And if he's able to do this consistently, he could be a number one guy as far as just being the number one guy to be able to lead a team with Brooklyn moving forward if he's able to keep this up. Obviously, Brooklyn fell short. They lost by 20 points. They got some decent contributions from Cameron Johnson. He had 18 points. Spencer did win. He dropped 14 points. Knowing Spencer could probably have better performances than what he was able to display in game one. We'll see whether or not that he can come back strong in game two. But Guys, it's pretty much how I laid it out. This was a very business type win for the 76ers. They did exactly what we needed to do. Or they did exactly what they needed to do. Um, they have a chance to go up 2-0 in this series before going back to Brooklyn for game 3. And when it comes to Brooklyn, Brooklyn's going to have to figure it out quick, fast, and in a hurry, because a 20-point loss on the road, not the way that you want to start out your playoff run in the first round. So definitely a good win from Philadelphia, and we'll see which team comes out on top going into game 2. So, Kev, I will kick the Hawks and Celtics game to you, bud.
Yeah, and then obviously I actually watched this game at the bar with my brother. It's still a weird sentence to say out loud, to be honest with you. I keep thinking he's a kid in my head. The kid's almost damn 23 years old. He's a big Trae Young fan. I love watching Jason Tatum, despite him going to Duke. Sorry, I almost threw up. Despite him going to the other university in North Carolina. So we wanted to kind of tune in and really watch this, and it was a slaughterhouse. I mean, I believe the Celtics were up by 30 plus points at one point in this game, and I mean, Atlanta could not hit the front side of a barn. Boston was knocking down what seemed to be every single shot they took. Dude, quite honestly, there were 3 people in 20 plus figures. Tatum goes for 25, Brown goes for 29, Derek White goes for 24. They couldn't be stopped.
Mm-hmm.
Boston is the definition of one of the best teams in the league, and they have a multitude of different options at that definitive number 1 scoring option. If Tatum's not hot, you have Jalen. If Jalen's not hot, you have Marcus Smart. You can feed it down low to Al Horford, who can also hit from the outside, who's over a 40% shooter this season from 3. Malcolm Brogdon is in contention for 6th man of the year. Boston has too many. You know what? You can literally play Russian roulette and pick a player on the starting lineup that can kill you outside of Robert Williams, and the Celtics did that. And when you talk about Atlanta, outside of DeJounte Murray going for 24, it was relatively embarrassing. I mean, we're talking about Trae Young going 5 of 18. He had 5 turnovers, only had 16 points. You had 12 points from John Collins. Hunter goes for 11. Capella's not an offensive scorer, so he probably has the best offensive output he's going to have in the postseason with 12 points. But every single person was negative in the plus-minus scale. There was no getting it done, and they were not knocking down shots. This is the definition of being outmatched and outclassed. Boston is at a different tier, a different stratosphere than Atlanta, and it showed in tenfold when it came down to it. Boston was able to get to the paint. Boston was able to knock down shots. Boston was able to get to the free throw line, and it just was in spurts. I mean, not spurts. It was in waves. So when you talk about the game as a whole, yes, Atlanta was able to hone in and get back into it in the second half. Boston seemed to have taken their foot off the gas pedal. In terms of the quarter output, like I did in the last game that I broke down, Atlanta was 19 to Boston's 29. Then it was 25 to 45 in favor of Boston, absolutely destroying them in that second quarter by 20 points. Then we talk about the second half. Atlanta wins that one 31 to 20 in that third quarter. And then again, they win the fourth quarter in points 24 to 18. Boston cannot afford to take their foot off the gas pedal and slow down. Yes, Atlanta does not play well in first halves, in stretches, but you still have Trae Young who can knock it down from 30 plus feet. DeJounte Murray is an all-around player, both on the defense and the offensive end. He was probably their best output because he went for, like I said, 24, 8, and 6 with 3 steals. So they're no one to slack off of. And when you talk about people not performing at a high enough clip, Bogdanovich has been horrible the last couple of weeks in the NBA season. He only had 9 points, but he was 2 of 7 from 3. The reason they acquired him was because he was a sharpshooter. He has been basically null and void in the last couple of games that he's played, including that play-in game against the Heat. So if you're only going to rely on Trae and DeJounte, this is going to be a sweep. People have to contribute. Saddiq Bey has to be able to put out more points than 6. You went out and acquired him in the trade market as well. Somebody that was out there putting up 40 to 50-point games in Detroit. You telling me 6 points is all you can muster up in a playoff game? You got to do better. Atlanta has to make adjustments. Boston has to remain aggressive if they want to go far. We know that you're better. We know that you guys are deeper, but you cannot afford to slack off to where Atlanta has momentum, and then you try to wake up. Games like that get away from you way too quick in this league. You don't want to be that team that blows a 30-point game window like the Mavericks have blown a multitude of 20-point games this season. That's neither here nor there. Overall, Boston hangs on to win. Atlanta finds a way to at least show some fight. Maybe you can build off of that going into game 2. But I would say that, like Kyle said, business as usual, and I think that this series is going to wrap up relatively quickly.
Yeah, when it comes to the 76ers going up against the Nets and the Celtics going up against the Hawks, Kev, I don't want to come off as disrespectful, but they're just on different classes.
Yeah.
Like the Celtics and the 76ers are just, as far as I see it, they're just head and shoulders above the competition that they're going up against, respectively against the Hawks and the Nets. Now, I know that the Nets have kind of gone through this whole turmoil thing this year when they traded for Mikal Bridges and getting rid of Katie and
Kyrie and
Kyrie.
Kevin.
Yeah, so it's like, I know that the Nets have kind of gone through the ringer this year. They made the playoffs and missed the play-in tournament entirely. So, I mean, at least that's a tip to the cap for them. But, when it comes to the Hawks, look, the Hawks looked great in that play-in tournament game. They didn't miss a beat playing against Miami on the road. They really kind of gave it to the Heat in that first play-in tournament game. But going up against a team like Boston that's just so stacked from top to bottom, they're just not going to be at a level that I think is going to be competitive to be any way, shape, or form a threat in this series. So, unfortunately for the Hawks, I think it's looking like a 4 or 5 game series for them. I think at best they can get a game. I think more than likely it will be a gentleman's sweep, but I can't rule out a potential sweep either. I think the Nets may have a potential to get one game back in Brooklyn. I think more than likely, if you're looking at like the Nets compared to the Hawks and thinking which team is more likely to get a win in their respective series, I'd probably go with the Nets. But I think that's pretty much it. I think both of these series are going to pretty much wrap up in 5. And who knows? Maybe in 4 in one case. Who knows? But
it all depends.
That's pretty much all the games, Kev. Pretty much hit everyone that we could hit. Outside of
wrap it up.
Outside of the one game that's currently ongoing right now, I believe the game is at halftime with the Nuggets and the Timberwolves. The Nuggets are up by 11 points. The score at halftime is 55-44. If I had to take a shot in the dark, I'm probably going to say the Nuggets win this game. More than likely, they're probably going to win the series as well. The Nuggets, unless they deal with some sort of catastrophic injury to one of their star players in Jamal Murray or Nikola Jokic, I think that's going to be handily in favor of the Nuggets from here on out. But who knows? We've seen crazier things, and we'll see what happens. But as of right now, the Nuggets are up 11 points at halftime in Game 1 against the Nuggets, and we'll see how that plays out for the rest of the night. But Kev, that pretty much covers what we had on the agenda. If there's anything else you want to go over, the floor is yours, but I got nothing more to add here.
Yeah, that's everything for me. I don't have anything else, guys. We've talked about this 100 times. We are eternally grateful for any support that we've had. YouTube, audio, TikTok, Instagram, however you guys have been doing it. We appreciate it significantly. And as this progresses, as the NBA playoffs roll out, you can safely assume that's going to be the majority of our content. But again, Kyle said the NHL playoffs begin this week, so expect some hockey being sprinkled in here and there, some baseball as well. Just because summertime is here does not mean we are not going to be able to provide content, or should I say summer is approaching.
It's summer in Florida.
Exactly, yeah, it is. But it is spring everywhere else, so we'll see what happens. But again, if that's everything we have, man, Kyle, let's take us on out of here. We will see you guys again as the week progresses, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, like Kev said, take it easy, and we'll see you guys later this week.